This video takes us into Module 2 of Chapter 2. By the end of this video, you should be able to explain what a neurotransmitter is and how they are synthesized. So we've been talking about these things called neurotransmitters. I've mentioned them. We've talked about how they bind to synaptic receptors on the postsynaptic cell. We've talked about how they alter the activity of that postsynaptic cell. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about what a neurotransmitter actually is. So they're chemicals. They travel across the synapse, we've already seen that, and they allow communication between neurons. So while the action potential travels down the axon within a neuron, once we get to that axon terminal, neurotransmitters are released, and that allows the presynaptic neuron to communicate with the postsynaptic neuron. This chemical transmission predominates throughout the nervous system. So there are electrical synapses, and you've seen some examples of those in other videos, but this chemical transmission, this release of neurotransmitters across the synapse, is the predominant way the nervous system communicates. Now we'll also talk about some other types of chemicals that allow for chemical communication, like hormones and neuropeptides, later on. So here's just an example of some different neurotransmitters that we might encounter the rest of the semester. So now we're going to talk about the major categories of neurotransmitters. So the first one is amino acids. So these are the same amino acids that make up the proteins in our body. Glutamate is one. Glutamate is one, and we'll learn that's the major excitatory neurotransmitter. GABA is another. That's the major inhibitory neurotransmitter, and then glycine as well. We also have monoamines. What this means is they have one amine molecule in their configuration. These are serotonin, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. So these four neurotransmitters are all monoamines. And that means that sometimes drugs that have an effect on one may have an effect on all four at some level because of their chemical similarity. And then these three, we'll see this on the next slide, I believe. These three, dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine, are also called catecholamines because they have a catechol molecule. Then we have acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is similar to an amino acid. We have various neuropeptides. We'll talk about those later on. Some examples of this would be endorphins or substance P. We have purines can act as neurotransmitters, adenosine or even ATP, and then gases. Nitric oxide is one such example. And this is nitric oxide, not nitrous oxide or the laughing gas. This is very different. So nitric oxide was actually once thought to be harmful in the brain, but we now know it's an important signaling molecule. Free radicals or oxidative stress can produce this nitric oxide. So it's kind of this double-edged sword. We need it for communication in the nervous system, but it can also cause chemical reactions to go awry, for cells to die, and things like that. So in terms of the synthesis of neurotransmitters, sometimes they come from things that are just simply in our diet, like choline can come from the metabolism or from our diet. Phenylalanine comes from our diet. Tryptophan from our diet. So these are precursors to neurotransmitters. So acetylcholine is simply an enzymatic reaction combines acetylcoenzyme A with choline, and thus we get acetylcholine. Phenylalanine from our diet is converted to tyrosine, which is converted to DOPA. This is something we'll come back and talk about as a precursor to dopamine. It's important in Parkinson's disease because a lot of patients are given something called L-DOPA. Dopamine, one little chemical reaction can change that into norepinephrine. Another chemical reaction can change norepinephrine into epinephrine. You see here, you're adding this group from dopamine to norepinephrine. You're adding a hydroxy group. And then tryptophan from the diet, converted to 5-hydroxytryptophan, converted into serotonin. Now remember, these are our catecholamines because they have a catechol molecule. Well, these are our monoamines because you see here they all have one amine molecule. And no, I don't expect you to memorize the synthesis of the neurotransmitters. I just want you to kind of have an understanding of how they come about. Here's just another diagram showing, again, tyrosine. Here's the enzyme will be tyrosine hydroxylase, leading us to DOPA. dopa decarboxylase to dopamine. Dopamine beta oxidase gives us norepinephrine. So showing you how closely related, especially these two neurotransmitters are.